Hey everybody, welcome to Gator Studios in Chatsworth, New Jersey. My name is Chris Morrissey. I represent the Northeast, and I think you know this guy right here.
You've probably seen me before. Hopefully you're not tired of me if you've watched a few of our shows, but I'm Mike Huber. I do some of the product development, training, and technical support here at Alliance. And we're excited to have you today, get into our presentation on how to clean and seal pavers. But we've got a couple more introductions, Chris.
Yeah, let's look at some of the people behind the scenes. Let's go to the OC cam. Mr. Tim Durkis. Gator Studios does not happen unless that gentleman is here. And then we got Jordan Lewis, who's going to be taking questions and putting up the polls.
He's the pride of North Carolina, from what I hear.
Absolutely, coming all the way from the south.
All right, well, we appreciate you joining us. Feel free to type any questions into the chat. We'll have Jordan try to read those out for us so we can answer them live as we go. If there's anything we can't get to, anything that's too detailed, we may have a rep reach out to you afterwards. There's an awful lot to potentially cover with cleaners and sealers. In fact, we could do a class that lasted all day, Chris.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. We're going to touch on some of the basics when it comes to the installations, but why don't we go over what we're doing for the day?
All right, so our agenda for the show today is to kind of talk about why we're going to seal pavers, right? How to prepare and prep the surface for sealing, and then how to actually apply these sealers. So we're not going to dig into the chemistry of sealers too much, the different varieties. We'll direct you to some resources to do your own research. Our reps can always help out on a case-by-case basis, but we really want to focus on how you're going to do this job, right? How we're going to prepare the surface and how we're going to install our sealers. Yep. So how many of our audience members have sealed projects before? Want to find out?
Yeah, why don't we put the poll there?
All right. Have you sealed a project before? Have you sealed 1 to 5, 6 to 10, over 10? I think if they've sealed over 10, we might be able to just turn the show over to them.
This is great. Actually, a ton of people have done over 10 jobs.
Yeah, we got a third of the audience that's never sealed before.
Yeah, okay. This is a good show for you then.
All right, so sealing, it can make some contractors nervous, Chris.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror stories out there, but it's really not that difficult.
Right, it's pretty simple. You need to kind of pay attention to detail when you're sealing. It's crazy to me, I wouldn't go get my truck painted if it was covered in dirt or salt, right? Would you?
No.
A lot of people think you don't have to clean pavers. They slap that sealer down right over top of dirt, debris, stains, efflorescence. Bad things happen if you don't prepare properly. So preparation is probably the most important aspect of a sealer job, and it's something that is commonly skipped or kind of shortcutted.
Yeah, for sure. But I think we need to start at the first point is, why do we seal in the first place?
So why are we going to seal? They bill these pavers as maintenance-free, right? That's how this was sold to me.
I'd kind of call it low maintenance. Yes, they're very resilient, against all the elements, but number one, there could be an aesthetic that they're potentially looking for.
Okay, so you install pavers and maybe you want to darken them, right? Some people like the way that they look when they're wet. Maybe the pavers have aged and kind of faded over time, so we could potentially enhance the color, right? We could also make them a little bit shinier or glossier.
Yep.
Make that light reflect off of them. We could also just protect them and not alter or change the color.
Yeah.
That's possible as well. So what we're basically trying to do is protect and potentially enhance our paver surface. So acid rain, dirt and debris in the environment, stains from using the patio or walkway or driveway.
Salt if you're in cold climate areas, all that.
A lot of different things that could potentially damage or age or make your pavers not look so great, and sealers can help to repel those, make them easier to clean. Sealers aren't a magic shield, right?
No.
You're going to still have to clean. You're still going to have to get stains removed from the surface, but the sealers are going to decrease the penetration of those stains into the paver and make things a lot easier to maintain.
Now, I know there's a lot of different carriers for the solid content. Which ones are we looking for?
Well, we've got a couple different ways that we can go about our sealing process. As we mentioned, you may like the way that your pavers look, right? You just simply want to protect them without altering the color or appearance. So in that case, our water-based natural look sealer is ideal. In fact, I've got a paver right here, and would you believe that I sealed half of that with natural look, Chris?
Absolutely not.
It truly is natural, right?
No, I don't see a difference.
All right, so what if I spray it with water?
Okay, I can see that one side is absorbing the moisture and one side isn't.
Right, so this side over here is protected with the natural look, right? It's repelling that water. Our water is soaking in there. So the natural look is a pretty cool sealer from Alliance. It's effectively invisible.
So this won't absorb in at all?
It is absorbing a little bit, right?
Okay.
It's not going to block off any water penetration. So definitely going to help, but the water that you see beading on here, well, that effect's going to go away in a few weeks. It's still protecting the paver, but water may not bead up for all that long.
So if I were to spill something on this, food-related, drink-related, I can probably expect the same thing. It's going to kind of stay up there, allow you to get to it quicker and get it off there.
Right, with any stain, the faster you get to it, the better, right? So you spill something on the patio, hey, hose it off, hit it with some soap and water. That's probably going to do the job if you have sealed it.
Now,
if you haven't sealed it, it's going to soak in.
Yep. Now, you said this is a penetrating sealer.
Right. So there are different ways to look at sealers, right? So there's water and solvent based that can potentially carry your sealing agents. There's also film forming and penetrating sealers. So this is a penetrating sealer. It kind of works its way down into the pores of the paver, blocking off the pathways for water to travel down deeper into that paver or natural stone. Now, film forming sealers work by kind of laying a layer of plastic on top of that paver, right?
Yep. And this is where you're getting your different gloss finishes. I mean, you can go from low gloss to high gloss. You get your enhancements, but that's
All
what we're
different
talking
sealers
about.
have different characteristics, some different trade-offs as far as lifespan, color enhancement, gloss. Here we've got the Alliance low gloss on this paver, right? So one half of it was done with low gloss. Oh, you can't really see a lot there. Let's take a look at a slight different angle on here.
Okay, I can see the line now.
So you can start seeing it, right? We can spray it with some water. And we see that one side is protected, one side is soaking in.
Okay.
So again, a little bit different than that natural look. We're getting a little bit of sheen or shine to it, right? And a plastic layer across the top, film forming, as opposed to that penetrating sealer that's worked its way into the paver itself.
Okay.
If you wanted a little bit of color enhancement, we've got our satin look here. So the satin look, well, that's a little bit more evident, right?
Yeah, so like we hear it a lot, like where homeowners want their pavers to look exactly like how it looks after it rains. And so we're looking for anything that says enhancement.
All right. Many people are, right? Most of our popular sellers have some kind of color enhancing agent, kind of enriching and enhancing the appearance of those pavers. So again, we can direct you to our ebook, to our blog. It has some great information on the different sealers Alliance offers. We've got some charts that explain the characteristics of these different sealers and kind of what they do, right? Do they give you a gloss? Do they give you color enhancement? Are they invisible? And so forth. Your local rep's also a good resource?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gone to a lot of job sites. We've helped contractors out with the applications, for just about all these sealers. But you got quite a bit of different resources. I mean, on that ebook, we got 40 plus pages of information in which you can gain knowledge for you and your staff and try to be very comfortable with this process.
We also have sealer samples available. So we've got these little containers of sealer that are available at your local dealer. Our reps have them. Great way to test out the sealers, get an idea of what that particular sealer is going to do on your paver. Always a great idea to do a test area before you do sealing, right?
Yeah, and if this is something that you're offering to your end user, it's definitely good to mark up a certain paving stone, or even if the homeowner has a leftover paver, you can physically put this sealer on their application so they can kind of get a good idea what it's going to look like.
All right, so we have to pick the right sealer, and part of picking the right sealer is not only the appearance, but the actual material that we're applying that sealer to. So if you are going to seal dry cast concrete pavers, well, that calls for one type of sealer technology. If you're going to seal clay brick or natural stone, well, you might need a different type of sealer. So today we're going to focus on sealing dry cast concrete pavers only. So a dry cast concrete paver is probably the most common hardscaping material out there, and we know that the characteristics of that material are going to be fairly uniform. ASTM standards say that a dry cast paver is going to be probably around 8,000 psi, less than 5% water absorption. We've got a rough texture. It is going to absorb that sealer. So we know what we're working with here. And acrylic film forming sealers are typically the go-to product for sealing a dry cast paver, whether they're water-based or solvent-based here.
Now, could you use a penetrating sealer on dry cast?
Certainly. Our natural look is an excellent choice. So if you don't want to alter the color or appearance, go with our natural look, right? Long-lasting fluorochemical-based sealer. If you want to kind of enhance or enrich the appearance, the satin look for a solvent-based sealer, or maybe the low or high-gloss color enhancer would be great potential options.
Yeah. Satin look's my favorite, I got to be honest.
All right.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with satin look for a little bit of color enhancement and kind of a slight sheen to it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so again, we could spend all day talking about the different sealers, their chemistries, the pros and cons of each one. Reach out to your Alliance rep or check out our blog if you need a little bit more information on what sealer to choose. But what we really want to dive into is the actual installation process here, Chris.
Sure. Well, the first thing we have to do is prep the job, right?
We need to prep. We talked about how important that was, right?
We did.
All right, so you go out to a patio, whether it's a brand new patio or something that was installed 10 years ago, it needs to be cleaned, right? Those pavers, they don't come clean from the factory.
Yeah, no, definitely
And sitting
not.
around for a decade, they are going to get dirty. So when you look at a patio and you're going to seal it, you need to assess what you actually have to clean. Each cleaner is going to be effective on a certain type of stain, right? If we use a soap on Efflorescence, what happens?
Nothing really.
Nothing really,
Yeah.
right? If we use an Efflorescence cleaner on oil, what happens?
Nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have to target the right chemical to the appropriate stain. We sell some specific spot cleaners. We're going to go through all these different sealers and kind of let you know what works, what doesn't, what may be ideal. But a couple of considerations kind of off the top before we get into cleaning those specific stains would be the pavers themselves, right? So when you look at those pavers, hey, maybe they're brand new. If they're brand new, a lot of pavers are being sealed from the factory, right?
Yep,
You actually
pre-sealed.
buy them pre-sealed. So a pre-sealed paver like this, can we seal it right away?
I mean, I don't think there's necessarily a need to seal it right away.
Well,
it's protected.
You can see that the water actually beads right up on the surface.
Yeah.
So that's not allowing water to soak in. That's not going to allow a sealer to soak in. So that is a key consideration on our sealer choice and our decision to seal it all, right?
Right.
Pre-sealed pavers should not be sealed right away. You should give them time for that sealer to kind of wear off, and that time frame may be 3 years, 4 years down the road. Once it's absorbing water again, they may be kind of time to recoat and reseal.
Let's just say a homeowner actually bought a piece of property and they want to rejuvenate everything, but they're unsure if there was a sealer applied at one point. What's one thing that they could do in order to kind of figure that out?
Well, it's important to assess whether or not those pavers were ever sealed before. So you look in the garage, is there a gallon of sealer left over? Maybe, maybe not.
Maybe not.
If there isn't, spray water on the patio, right? Does the water kind of soak in right away, or does it sit on the surface? Obviously, sitting on the surface means it was probably sealed. You can also do a xylene test. So you can apply some xylene or acetone to the surface of that paver and rub it around a little bit. If the surface becomes sticky or tacky, there is probably a solvent-based sealer on there, right? If the paver does not become sticky or tacky, it's quite possible that it was either a water-based sealer or there's no sealer at all on there, right?
Right.
So that's important because you have to have a compatible sealer chemistry to recoat whatever was on there. So safe bet is to always use a solvent-based sealer because a solvent can recoat solvent or water-based, right?
Okay.
Water-based sealer cannot recoat a solvent-based job.
And what could happen if we were to put a water-based sealer onto a satin, or a solvent-based sealer?
Well, satin or wet look, right?
Yep.
That sealer wouldn't bond to the surface. It would end up drying kind of hazy and opaque on top of the solvent-based sealer. It would potentially be prone to flaking off, so you'd have a discolored sealer that might not bond well and might peel off.
So
Not a good situation.
You're telling me it's going to look worse than before you started?
Way worse.
Okay.
And be difficult to fix.
Okay, just to summarize, make sure it's always a solvent on top of something that you're unsure of, whether it be a water-based or a solvent-based. A satin look or a wet look will be the way to go.
All right. Then we've got that age-old question, how long do you wait before sealing?
I don't know, why don't we ask the audience and see what they think?
All right, let's ask the audience here.
Okay, so how long after installing a new project
there we go.
can you
All right.
seal pavers? We have immediately after the install, 7 days after the install, 30 days after the install, 60 days after the install, or 90 days after the install. We're getting quite a few answers for the 90 days.
So a lot of people think you got to wait 90 days, and it's a mix, kind of evenly split between all of the other options there.
Yep.
Well, they're all potentially correct, but they're all potentially incorrect as well, Chris.
Explain, please.
So when you have a paver and you install it, that paver may end up having some efflorescence. Now, efflorescence, it's that whitish mineral deposit that you might see leaching out of the paver. And that may not be apparent the day you install it. That may come out over time. So does that come out a week after you install it, 2 weeks after you install it? Very difficult to say. What you really want, more than just a straight time window, is a certain number of weather cycles of wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. If those pavers are getting soaked and drying out, getting soaked and drying out, that's going to bring efflorescence to the surface if it is going to occur.
Okay, can efflorescence bloom out when a sealer is existing?
It can. If you put a sealer down and the paver's going to have some efflorescence come out, it's going to work its way up to the surface and potentially get trapped underneath that sealer.
Okay, and there's no way of cleaning it if it's underneath the sealer?
Depends on your sealer. If you had used a penetrating sealer like the natural look, you should be able to clean that efflorescence. No big deal.
Okay.
Use a film-forming sealer, odds are that efflorescence is going to be difficult or impossible to clean through that sealer layer.
Okay.
So you got to be careful with what you're doing. Wait a few weather cycles, wet, dry, allow any efflorescence to come out. Clean it appropriately before you apply that sealer. So that could be, 60 days. It could be a year. It all depends on your environment, right? How often you're getting rain and having that dry out. If you really need to seal and protect quickly, consider that natural look, the penetrating sealer there.
Okay. Well, how about just like cleaning in general? There's a bunch of different ways to do so.
There are. Let's see what our audience thinks about different ways to clean pavers before sealing them. So what do we have here?
Okay, so what is the best way to practice before sealing pavers? Do we rinse with a garden hose, pressure wash pavers, effloresce clean, or cleaning is not necessary? I love how he added that last one in there.
Yeah, nobody's saying cleaning is not necessary. That's surprising.
I really appreciate you all. You have no idea.
All right, so we're kind of evenly split between pressure wash and efflorescence clean. I'm going to go grab my pressure washer and have at these pavers, Chris.
Yeah, but I hear you have a 4,400 PSI pressure washer.
I have a big old pressure washer. In fact, it doesn't matter how large your pressure washer is. Even that little electric jobber from Home Depot can do some serious damage to a pressure washer. I've got a paver here. See those nice squiggly lines on there?
I do.
Those squiggly lines are dug into the surface of the paver.
Okay, so
that's permanent.
But when I put my sealer over, that's going to be hidden.
Nope. Sealers tend to highlight flaws, not hide them. Okay. That's going to be even more apparent when you put a sealer on it. Even if it goes away when it's wet, wet look sealer doesn't make it disappear.
Yep.
Right? That is a damaged paver. There is no way you can recover from that. So physically etched squiggle lines or stripes from a pressure washer, those pavers are ruined. There's really not much you can do to recover from that.
Yep, and then aside from just leaving squiggly marks or pressure washer lines in the paver itself, we also got to be conscious that the polysand could potentially be affected too. PSI, the higher it is, the more chance that can happen. So if you were going to use a pressure washer, it's more of a rinsing purpose.
Right. If you look at the tips that I have here, you may see different tips when you get your pressure washer. You've got a white tip, which is pretty safe. That's a 40-degree fan. You've got a green tip. That's also pretty safe, a 25-degree tip. Yellow tip, that's a 10-degree fan, starting to get a little dangerous.
Okay.
And then this red tip, you should probably throw out as soon as you buy your pressure washer. There is really no reason to have that unless you want to drill holes in a piece of wood or concrete, right?
Okay.
You have to do your pressure washing evenly and uniformly. You've got to be careful with it. It can be a great way to get a bunch of dirt and debris, muck off of your paver surface, but it is not enough on its own to prep for sealing, and you can potentially cause some collateral damage, either etching those pavers, leaving squiggly marks all over the place, or blowing out all your polymeric sand.
Yep. And efflorescence was the other option that most of you were choosing over there, and that is what we're going to recommend as a manufacturer. But there's a few things we have to do before the efflorescence cleaning, and that is spot treating.
All right, so before we get to the efflorescence cleaner, which is a vital step before sealing, it's going to remove any efflorescence, as the name implies, and kind of lightly etch those pavers so that the sealer can attach to the surface and bond very strongly. We've got to make sure we take care of any of those unique spot stains, right? We talked about how efflorescence cleaner isn't going to do anything to an oil stain, right?
No, and like there's outdoor kitchens now and, you know, areas around grills. So we're talking about oils from foods potentially. We could have rust from patio furniture. There's an enormous amount of problems that can occur.
All right, so you could have rust, right? Rust is a common occurrence outdoors, right? People leave, you know, patio furniture, tools, toys, all kinds of things on pavers. You may have fertilizer marks, water marks from well water.
Snow blowers going
scraping
across,
back and forth,
walkways,
right? So rust remover is an acid material that's going to do a great job of removing surface rust. If you've got iron embedded in your paver or stone, really deep gouges from plow blades, well, that may not come off. Okay. But your typical surface rust is going to come out pretty well. So rust remover is an acidic material. Right, we want to wet our paver down.
That's just water, right, Mike?
Just water. We're going to wet our paver down first, and then we are going to apply our rust remover. So our rust remover is a fairly strong acid, right? It is going to kind of foam up and react with the surface there as we agitate it gently.
I notice you're not using a steel brush.
Why would you use a steel brush when you're trying to get rid of rust, right?
Yeah, I think we might be putting rust into
embed more steel and iron into that process there. Yeah. So it is pretty easy. You have to be careful. That rust remover is a very strong acid, so it can potentially damage pavers. We want to wet them down first, apply that rust remover, and then rinse thoroughly fairly quickly. What happens if you don't rinse rust remover?
Well, it's going to continue to eat away at the cement within the concrete. And then you're going to eventually just etch it where the pores are going to be opened up. It's definitely going to create a visual appearance that looks very much different from the rest of the project.
Well, that certainly isn't ideal.
No.
You can also get a big white blotch if you don't rinse well enough from the rust remover.
How do I get the white blotch off?
You apply more rust remover and rinse it appropriately, right?
Okay.
You got to rinse it better the next time around. All right, so we've got an oil stain here.
What kind of oil is this?
Just regular motor oil.
Okay. Synthetic?
Well, that's a good question, right? How well you're going to be able to remove an oil stain typically depends on how long that stain has been kind of soaking into the paver and what that oil actually is, right? Dirty motor oil is harder to get out than clean motor oil.
For sure.
Synthetic motor oil is tougher to remove than regular conventional motor oil.
But what about the temperature of the paver as the oil hits it? Can't that affect the viscosity and absorb in deeper?
Sure. Right? If that oil's super hot, it's going to soak into the paver deeper, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you clean an oil stain, you've got to manage those expectations, really with any stain, right?
Sure.
I'm going to improve the appearance of this stain, but I may not be able to completely remove it. So what are we going to use on an oil stain, Chris?
We're going to use our XP oil and grease remover.
All right, so the XP oil and grease remover, which I have here, we'll throw it up front for you. That is a pretty cool product. It goes on as a kind of goopy, gloppy paste, and as that paste dries, it actually sucks the oil out of the paver itself. So we pour some of this stuff out.
Just want to add that Mike did shake up this bottle before we brought it to the table. I think sometimes the solution inside can separate, so just make sure you give it a good shake.
Yeah, if you don't shake it up, it can separate a little bit, right? All right, so where did my brush go here,
So
Chris?
we're letting this XP oil and grease remover kind of sit on this paver, on this oil stain. We're going to kind of move it around a little bit, make sure we cover every little inch of it.
So you don't get great coverage out of this, right? You're talking maybe, what, 3-4 square feet out of a bottle?
Well, we're just spot cleaning, Mike. Hopefully we're not going after those oil stains in a driveway or anything like that.
Yeah, hopefully they didn't have the oil tanker leak.
Yeah.
So we kind of spread our cleaner out like this, and then we let it dry, right?
Okay.
As it dries out, it is going to extract that oil and dry completely, right? So as that dries, we're able to then remove it from the surface by brushing. So I can grab an example of that here.
Yeah, and I noticed that Mike left that on fairly thick. So, don't feel like you need to spread the product out, as much as possible. You really want there to be a good amount for that oil to kind of wick up into.
All right, so you can see what our dried results look like here. that discoloration is actually the oil that sucked out of the paver.
All right, so it did its job.
Yep, did its job well. So we simply brush this to remove it from the surface.
So this is a powder.
We can kind of vacuum that up.
Now, what happens if I don't get 100% of the stain out?
Well, you can apply again, right? Looks like we didn't get all of the stain
No, I
there,
still
right?
see some.
You still see a little bit of an imprint there. So we can do a repeat application. There's no guarantee that you're eventually going to get it all out, right? You might get a little bit more of it out with another application. Oil stains can be very difficult and tough. The other thing that you'll need to do is once you brush off that residue, you will need to scrub that area with soap and water or give it a light pressure washing to remove the kind of white material that's lodged in the pores of the paver there. Have to be careful with both rust remover and the XP oil and grease on a sealed surface. That can damage the sealer.
Yeah, it will leave a blemish in the sealer itself, and you'll probably have to spot clean or spot treat the sealer.
All right. Any questions out there, Jordan?
Yeah, so we have a few. First one about the XP oil remover is how long will it be effective? So if that stain's been there for longer than 24 hours and maybe a week, how well will that work?
Tough to say. I can't tell you from here. You give it a try, and it will improve that stain. Will it remove it 100%? Probably not. Is the range going to be somewhere from 50% to 90% better?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Again, conventional oils are easier to clean than synthetic oils. Cleaner hydraulic oil spills compared to motor oil spills are going to be easier to clean. But oil is tough. It soaks down deep into that porous concrete paver, and it can be difficult to remove and extract.
Yeah, and I'd agree with Mike there. The synthetic oils from vehicles, they're very much harder to get out. A lot of times it's better off to just kind of replace the pavers if possible. But when it comes to like the oil stains from food, this product worked extremely well on that. I've had really good success over my career.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, so they asked with sealing, specifically penetrating sealers, but I guess you could do film forming as well. Slippery when wet. Which ones are slippery, which ones aren't, which is best around a pool deck maybe?
All right. Well, any sealer is going to potentially alter the surface texture of a paver. Film forming sealers weigh more than a penetrating sealer, right? If we're physically leaving a layer of plastic with a film forming sealer over the surface, well, that is potentially going to be more slippery than a sealer that goes down into the top layer of the paver. Applied at the correct ratio, that paver should still feel like a piece of concrete, no matter what sealer you use, right? If it's starting to feel like plastic, you're applying that sealer too heavily. But if you've got a very smooth material, it can definitely make the surface a little more slippery. So maybe choose the penetrating sealer around a pool, or potentially put in a traction aid into that film forming sealer.
And that's a good point, Mike. When that paver starts to feel like plastic, the slipperiness goes through the roof. But just so everybody's on the same page, for all of our sealer applications, you want to do one coat and one coat only. There's no need to do 2 coats or 3 coats.
All right, so what else might you get on pavers, Chris?
How about some citronella wax or candle wax?
That's pretty common, right? People are burning candles out on their patio, and you might get some wax. That's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
Right? What does wax repel?
Everything.
Water? Cleaner? It's tough to get that wax off. So you're going to have to physically remove as much of it from the surface as you can. And Chris is using a plastic scraper there, right? Use a metal scraper. What are you doing? Potentially scratching the surface, adding iron that's going to be embedded there. So we can potentially use that plastic scraper to get as much off the surface as we can.
This is still taking forever, Mike.
Yeah, it's not easy, right? A little bit of heat can potentially help, kind of melt that and get it off. So we want to remove as much as we can with the plastic scraper first, and then we still have to attack what's left, right?
Yeah, so to get the solids off, I found a really good method works. Take a towel, take an iron, put the towel down, put the iron on it, and it's actually somewhat what we call a heat transfer. The oil and the wax will start to absorb into the towel.
All right, that's a pretty good trick.
Yeah.
If you're stuck going at it with a brush, well, a brush can help remove a little more of that residue. We're using a brass brush here, right? Why is that, Chris?
So we don't add any more iron into the paver.
Right. We want to make sure we're not adding any more iron into the system, potentially leaving scratch marks or rust down the road. Once you get as much of that wax off the surface as you can potentially, at this point, maybe do that iron trick. Try to get that transfer to occur into the towel, drawing that wax up towards the heat, and or hit it with some kind of solvent like a xylene or acetone to
Loosen
help
it up a little bit.
loosen up the wax material.
Okay. Another big problem I see out there, Mike, when it comes to people thinking about cleaning and sealing is scuff marks. And scuff marks can occur from many different things, dragging patio furniture. Sometimes during the installation, contractor might not have a Teflon pad underneath the plate compactor, and then you kind of get these blemishes on the top surfaces of the paving.
Well,
stone.
I've got a paver that's got some blemishes, right? You can see all of these scuff marks.
Yep.
Sealer's not going to hide that, Chris.
I hear it does.
It does not.
Okay.
Sealers, as we talked about, they tend to highlight flaws, not hide them. So if you've got scuff marks and gouges and scrapes, they might disappear kind of when it gets wet. Odds are a sealer is not going to hide them, right? Sealer is going to make those pop out even more. So you got to be careful. If you've got scuffs, you may have to replace those pavers before you go ahead and seal.
So permanent damage.
It is pretty permanent.
Okay.
All right. Now, this paver, not only does it have scuff marks on it, but it's filthy.
Yeah, it looks like you got some organics, you got some mold, mildew, whatever the hell it is.
All right, so moss, mold, and mildew can be a very common problem on pavers. Soap and water doesn't do much on moss, mold, and mildew, right?
Not really,
That's
no.
why you have Tilex for the bathroom.
Yep.
We need a similar type of product for our patio. So what we're going to recommend here is Pool Shock, oddly enough.
Pool Shock works great, actually, in this
All right.
scenario.
So Pool Shock is basically a high-powered bleach solution, sodium hypochlorite, and that is going to do a great job of killing any organic material, moss, mold, and mildew, removing leaf stains, tannic acids from not cleaning the leaves off of your patio, and not berry fruit-type stains as well. So how are we going to do this Pool Shock treatment on a patio?
Well, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. The first one, you can find liquid Pool Shock, which comes in a gallon form, or actually comes in a powderized package, usually measured in ounces. But we're going to be mixing that with water. We're going to spread it over the overall project, let it dwell, agitate if need to, and rinse away.
All right, so it's pretty safe, it's pretty cost effective, it does a great job. It's almost like a magic trick. You can watch these pretty, disgusting looking stains disappear in front of your eyes. So there we had some leaf stains on that piece of natural stone. We did the lower half of it with our Pool Shock, and it lightened right up.
Now, is Pool Shock a good method for prepping for sealing?
It is not. I mean, it's a step in the process, right? That's going to get rid of our organic stains, our moss, mold, and mildew, but we still haven't removed efflorescence, if that's present.
Yeah.
We still haven't lightly etched the paver surface to open up the pores of the paver and prep it to bond properly to that sealer. So we're getting closer,
Yep.
but we're still not completely there yet.
Okay, so we got rid of the organic matter, we got rid of some of the leaf stains, but we still have to go ahead and prep the job for sealing. And we said that before, efflorescence cleaning is going to be the way to go.
Right, efflorescence cleaner is completely required in any sealing project, right? Whether it's a new job, an old job, every project needs to be efflorescence cleaned. Now, I don't know, say we sell 1,000 gallons of sealer every year, Chris. How many gallons of efflorescence cleaner do we sell?
I believe the right number is 1,000 gallons.
That's not real life, though, right? That's what it should be. But the ratio is way off. We're not seeing a gallon of efflorescence cleaner go out for every gallon of sealer that is purchased, but that's what should be happening, right? Every job should be getting cleaned with Efflo Cleaner before applying a sealer. Very important to the success of the project. In my opinion, if you're going to skip the efflorescence cleaning, you might as well skip sealing.
Yeah, prepping is the most important part of making sure that you have minimal issues from the sealing application itself. So it's a step that cannot be missed. But as far as the strength of it, is this similar to muriatic acid?
No, it definitely isn't. So the Efflo Cleaner from Alliance is a blend of nitric and phosphoric acids. So it is a much safer solution for concrete pavers than muriatic acid. Muriatic acid is very common in the masonry world, right? They're using it to clean up mortar splatters and efflorescence, but they're typically using it on natural stone or clay brick that's a little bit more acid resistant.
Okay. And let's just say you went like full concentrate and you didn't dilute the efflorescence cleaner. What could potentially happen in that scenario?
Well, that wouldn't be good, right? You definitely want to dilute 4 parts water to 1 part cleaner with the efflorescence cleaner material. You've got to use it at the appropriate ratio and use it safely. If you use that muriatic acid or you happen to use the efflorescence cleaner full strength, you could actually kind of ruin the surface of that paver.
Wow.
So half of that paver was cleaned with muriatic acid, and look what happened, right? It's pitted. It looks like a 30-year-old paver.
Right, but again, once I put sealer on it, that's all going to blend in together.
Hey, you might hope so, but it's not going to happen, Chris.
Okay. One thing I want to add with the efflorescence cleaning, and then we also mentioned the pool shock cleaning to get rid of the organics. You would want to stay away, like have a good amount of time in between those 2 cleanings. You definitely don't want to mix a chlorine bleach solution with an acid solution because some of that runoff goes off the patio. It's eventually going to mix in together, and what does that create, Mike?
It creates some toxic fumes. So
does.
Keep your chlorine bleach solution and your acids far apart. Make sure you rinse well and give it a little time in between doing those cleaning steps.
How much time would you wait? What do you think?
I don't know, an hour or so.
All right. So,
Sunlight breaks chlorine down pretty quickly, let it drain into the soils and dissipate.
Okay. Very good. What about the shampoo?
The Gator shampoo. So Gator shampoo is a great general cleaning product, but it's not the right way to prep for sealing, Chris. It's just not strong enough. So, hey, if the homeowner wants to go out and clean their patio every spring, or they want to clean it before or after an event that they're having, shampoo is a great option. It's detergent with a mild acid, but it is not going to lightly etch those pavers and open up the pores to accept a sealer.
Okay, so we're going to stay away from the shampoo when it comes to prepping for sealing. If the homeowner wants to go ahead and use it for general cleaning, that's where we'll go. But as far as applying either the shampoo or the efflorescence cleaner, what are we using, a pump sprayer?
I see that all the time, Chris, and that's the wrong way to apply efflorescence cleaner. When we make up our efflorescence cleaner solution, we're mixing 4 gallons of water to 1 gallon of efflorescence cleaner, giving us 5 gallons of diluted cleaner. Now that 5 gallons of cleaner covers 200 square feet of pavers.
Okay.
If I put that solution in a pump sprayer and told you to cover, to go out and spray the patio, how much square footage do you think you'd hit?
I mean, if I had 3 gallons of solution in my sprayer, I'd probably go, what, 600 square feet, maybe
800,
more?
900.
Yeah.
You'd be spreading that cleaner way too thin, right? We're trying to get the acid in the efflorescence cleaner to react with the surface, with the potential minerals that are causing the efflorescence and the surface of the concrete itself. If we spread that acid too thin, it's not going to do the job that we intended to do.
Okay, so just for your purposes of calculating your material cost, so for every 200 square feet, you're going to need 1 gallon of efflorescence cleaner.
You also need 1 gallon of sealer.
You do?
That's pretty handy.
After the fact, for sure.
All right, so 200 square feet for 5 gallons of mixed up efflorescence cleaner diluted material. Now, we can't use a pump sprayer.
No.
How are we going to distribute that?
Now, a watering can seems to work very good. I do know some people that will mix in a 5-gallon container and just pour right out of it, but it's not really effective as far as getting everything covered.
Right, we want to hit every square inch of our project with fresh cleaner. If we dump all the cleaner out in one spot, it's possible it's all going to react and the acids will be neutralized. And as you push that cleaner around the surface, all you're doing is spreading dirty water around. We're going to wet the surface of our pavers or stone down. That kind of protects it from the acid. And we don't want puddling or ponding, so we'll blow off any excess water before we apply that efflorescence cleaner. We need to apply that efflorescence cleaner at a heavy rate, right? 200 square feet per 5-gallon bucket. That's going to need to hit every square inch of the paver or stone surface with cleaner right out of our dispenser. We simply kind of agitate it lightly with a stiff bristle broom. The acid is doing the work. It's really not the elbow grease that's going to clean your efflorescence off. Never let it dry on the surface, and then we're going to rinse that well until we no longer see any bubbles coming off of the surface. So it's a pretty simple process. You can't really tell if that efflorescence is gone until it dries, though, so we may have to repeat this process depending on how severe that efflorescence was. So having that foaming reaction shows you it's working. The chemical is kind of doing its job, eating away at that efflorescence. Agitating it and spreading it around a little bit with a push broom can help. If it starts to dry out on a hot day, you can add more water to it. It helps to work in smaller, more manageable areas. We need to rinse that off well before it dries.
Okay, so I've agitated, it's had some dwell time. How do I know that it's completely off the surface? How much time should I, or how much rinsing do I need to do?
Well, that is a definite challenge. You kind of have a little visual aid with the efflorescence cleaner. We put a little bit of soap in there, one, to help any debris stay in suspension, but two, you rinse until you don't really see any more soap bubbles.
Okay. So once the bubbles are off the project, it's safe to say that all the acid is off the project.
That is pretty safe to say.
Okay.
Now, is the efflorescence gone?
I don't know.
We don't know. When the surface is wet, it's really hard to tell if the efflorescence is gone from that project, right? You really have to wait for it to dry, unfortunately, in order to see if your efflorescence cleaning was effective. It's possible that one application at 4-to-1 takes all the efflorescence off the surface. It's possible that it would need multiple applications of efflorescence cleaner to remove heavier deposits of efflorescence, maybe grid lines from the paver packaging layers, rings, something of that nature. Sometimes there's efflorescence that's almost impossible to remove.
Yeah. So if you did have a severe case of efflorescence, you would do your first cleaning, rinse it off, of course, and then you come back and blow dry it and see if there's still any efflorescence present, and you might have to do another cleaning right then and there. It's kind of terrible when you come back the next day prepared to seal. Now that it's dry, and it's still all white. So spend some time, dry it out if you were dealing with a severe efflorescence issue.
All right. Any questions out there, Jordan, before we get into the sealer itself?
Yeah, so one person was curious about permeable installs after sealing. Do you lose that permeability completely? What does that look like?
All right, so if you had a permeable install and you applied a sealer to it, you're going to decrease the permeability to some degree, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Now, it depends on what sealer you're using, right? A penetrating sealer, not going to decrease the permeability all that much. A film-forming sealer is going to have a much larger effect. But it also depends on what you've got in that joint, right?
Yeah, maybe if you have like Aqua Rock, or if you have like a polysand, or if you have nitro.
Right, so if you've got Aqua Rock, well, that's got a very high flow rate. So if you decrease that very high flow rate by 20%, hey, probably no big deal.
Right.
If you've got nitro in the joints, your flow rate's a little bit lower, the voids are smaller, you might decrease the flow rate of nitro by 50%. That could be a bigger issue.
Yeah, I think it's a little counterproductive to use an acrylic sealer on something that you're looking to be permeable.
Right. What else do you have, Jordan?
Safe around plants, animals, stuff like that for cleaning and sealing. So efflorescence cleaner, maybe sealer that, got a little bit onto the plants, whatever it may be.
Good
All
question.
right, so they're probably, I wouldn't consider them safe for animals or plants. So let's break it down a little bit. Efflorescence cleaner, that's not going to harm your plants, right?
It's an acid.
It's a mild acid, though, right? So it's not all that strong. And one of the components is nitric acid. You know where else they use nitrogen?
The ground.
Fertilizer.
Yeah.
So sometimes you might get a little bit of a fertilization effect from that excess runoff of your efflorescence cleaner, but all that water that you're using to rinse the surface is going to dilute it well enough. General best practice is to wet your plants down, the grass down, the mulch areas a little bit before you apply your efflorescence cleaner to the patio. One thing that you might want to be careful, though, of is any poured concrete that's around your pavers, right, Chris?
Yeah, explain.
If you've got poured concrete, say a sidewalk or a driveway that butts up against your pavers, that concrete, poured concrete, is not nearly as strong or tough as the concrete pavers. So the acid in the efflorescence cleaner, the runoff from washing your pavers, may negatively affect that poured concrete, right?
Yeah, it might.
You could leave streaks or lines or eat away at that concrete, making it look bad. So got to be careful where your runoff water is going in terms of any poured concrete that's around the area.
You might have to end up cleaning the poured concrete just so it all looks okay.
All right, so how about applying sealers? We don't really want much overspray on plants, right? We don't want to block off the plant's ability to breathe and move water in and out. So spraying plants with sealers typically kills them.
Yeah, but there's some prep involved when it comes to the sealing process, which we will get into in a little bit.
All right, anything else at this point, Jordan?
Big question I keep seeing is, could the efflorescence cleaner damage the polysand between the pavers?
That's a good question. So efflorescence cleaner is an acid. Polymeric sands are very acid resistant. They're essentially plastic polymers, and efflorescence cleaner comes in a plastic jug because acids and plastics don't react. So we are not going to have any issues with our polymeric sand from a chemical standpoint, but you're soaking the area, you're scrubbing it, if your polymeric sand is wet, if you use a pressure washer to rinse your efflorescence cleaner, you could potentially damage some polymeric sand.
Yeah, you definitely want to use like a hard bristle brush, something that's not going to be all that flimsy and kind of get into the low points, into the joints, and start being abrasive to those polysand joints.
All right. Anything else, Jordan?
This is the last one I see, and I'll let y'all get back to it. They were curious. I've seen a few questions. How many weather cycles need to happen before sealing?
How many weather cycles need to happen before sealing?
17.
6. We can't tell you a definitive answer there. All pavers are different, right? They spend millions and millions of dollars every year with different treatments and different chemicals to try to minimize efflorescence in concrete pavers. They're doing research all the time to try to understand it and minimize it, but they cannot control it. They can't predict when it's going to occur. It's unfortunately kind of random, and when and how it's going to come out is a little bit random as well. But if you've got something in the order of 6, 8, 10 wet dry cycles, you probably would see it if it is going to occur. All right. Questions done.
All right, let's move on to the sealing.
Let's move on to the actual application of our sealer. So we've prepped our surface properly, right?
Yep.
We took care of all of those spots. We took care of a general efflorescence cleaning. We treated any moss, mold, and mildew that could have been occurring. And we let our surface dry, right?
Well, that's probably the key thing you want to look for the next day when you return.
All right, so we have to have a relatively dry surface to seal. Now, there's some tolerance of water-based sealers to a damp surface, but we don't want a soaking wet surface for any sealer. Solvent-based sealers need a completely dry surface. Now, that's the paver and the joint itself, right?
Yeah, because there could be the joining material, the moisture within could definitely affect the longevity of the sealer that rests right on top of the joining material.
All right, so hey, you get a kind of a feel for it over time, but if you need a little bit of help in figuring out if the pavers are dry enough, I suggest taping down some plastic to the surface of the paver, maybe going over a joint area, and take a look at it a half hour later. If there's water vapor, moisture that's trapped underneath that plastic, the pavers are too wet, the joints are still too wet, you need to wait longer for it to dry.
So condensation will build up underneath the plastic and it'll be visible.
Yep,
That's
okay. Typically what happens.
Okay.
So we need a dry surface. We also need to work in the right weather conditions, right?
Yeah, temperature is kind of big in this. We're looking for a surface temp anywhere from 65 to 85 degrees, and that's surface temp. So if it's a 85-degree day outside, but it's in direct sunlight, what do you think the temperature could be on a paving stone?
You could be pushing 120 degrees pretty easily, even if this air temperature is 85, right? Dark-colored pavers absorbing heat from the sun all day, they can get really hot. So, you've got a range of temperatures, 50 to 80, 60 to 85. There's some differences in what is tolerable out there, and part of that comes with your comfort and your skill level, right? I'm pretty sure I could go out and install a solvent-based sealer at 90 degrees and probably do it successfully. But if it's your first time sealing, you probably want to work in a more moderate temperature range, more controlled conditions, give you a little bit more flexibility in terms of working with the sealer and having it turn out properly on that job site.
Now, what about like water-based sealers on the colder days compared to solvent-based?
Well, the colder it is, the slower those water-based sealers are going to dry. And we don't want it to drop below freezing. What happens below freezing?
That is standstill.
The water turns to ice, right?
Yeah.
Not good for a sealer that's trying to form a film. So we do want to work generally above freezing for all of our sealers. And part of the consideration is how long those sealers take to dry. Solvent-based sealers dry very quickly, about 90 minutes, Chris.
Yep.
Water-based sealers take a little longer, don't they?
Yeah, roughly 24 hours to really get a cure.
24 hours?
24 hours.
So that's much longer.
Yep.
Solvent-based sealers effectively dry in 90 minutes. Water-based sealers take 24 hours to cure. What happens if it rains within that 24-hour window on a water-based sealer, Chris?
That's going to be a problem. So the moisture from the rain will absorb into your finish. And then the entire project, when you come back the next day, is going to be white. And I don't know if there's a way to correct that.
There really isn't with water-based sealers. Solvent-based sealers, you could potentially fix an issue with moisture using xylene or acetone, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But water-based sealers, you're in big trouble.
Yep.
Now,
solvent-based sealers, so I know you mentioned that it dries within 90 minutes. Does that mean that it could rain 90 minutes after application and I'd be okay?
it does.
Perfect. So sounds like you got a lot more wiggle room when it comes to solvent-based compared to water-based.
You do in some ways, but with the solvent-based sealers, you have to have a perfectly dry surface, right? If you had a little bit of moisture in those pavers, the water-based sealer would tolerate that a little bit better. So kind of backwards, right?
Okay, so solvents are sensitive to moisture,
Beforehand.
and then water-based will absorb that or wouldn't really hurt it all that much?
Exactly. Okay. So solvent-based sealers are sensitive to moisture in the system when you're applying it. Rain safe pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Water-based sealers, well, they can tolerate a little bit of dampness in the pavers or the joint when you apply it, but they can't get rained on for 24 hours. And that doesn't just mean rain.
No.
What if the homeowners forgot to put their sprinkler system to the off position?
No, when you get into the service, please make sure you ask the homeowner, do they have a sprinkler system? And if so, turn it off, remove parts, take them with you because they will put them back on and let that thing rip, and then you'll come back with a huge mess.
All right, so going back to that idea of temperature, Chris.
Okay.
I went out to a sealer job once, and half the job looked great. Nice color-enhanced pavers, clear. The other side was white and cloudy, and contractor said, what the heck? Why is half of this white and cloudy, and why is half of it perfect? So I'm sitting there in the backyard looking at this project, and I see the shadow line of the house kind of moving across the patio. Shadow line corresponded pretty much to the same angle as that defective sealer line.
Okay.
So part of that job was in shade, right? It was cooler when that sealer was applied. That sealer worked. Part of that job was in that sunny, hot area.
Too hot.
The surface was way too hot. So it is key to work within that temperature range. If those pavers are too hot, the sealer essentially flashes, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it dries too quickly, doesn't get a good absorption into the paving stones, and you're left with like a thick coating on top.
All right, so drying too quickly can cause whiteness or haziness. What's one good way to check that surface temperature?
How about a heat gun?
How about a heat gun, right? I'm going to duck under here and find our heat gun real quick. Yeah. So an infrared thermometer like this here can be a great way to check your temperature, right? We can get a quick reading. Only 79 degrees
79?
here. A little chilly. Perfect ceiling temperature.
It's a good ceiling temp.
So we're talking about air temperature and surface temperature. Having an infrared thermometer is a vital tool to kind of establishing the correct surface temperature and range in which to work. Another thing I hear all the time, contractor tells me, it was hot today, it was 95 degrees, but I'll go at the end of the day, 4 o'clock, and I'll seal those pavers.
Still got to check, Mike.
Soaking in the sun all day, they're probably pretty hot, right?
Yeah, it usually takes a good like 40 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour of zero sunlight on it for them to really start to cool down, but still you need to check with that heat gun.
And sometimes they don't, so you're better off going first thing in the morning rather than at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Pavers were in the dark all night, probably cooler. You get that sealer on before it gets too hot. You know, it's all right if it starts to heat up throughout the day, but we want to get that sealer on while those pavers are relatively cool so it's not cooking that sealer as it's applied.
Very good. How about some tools that we need to use for this application?
Some tools that we would need for sealing. Well, you typically apply paint and sealers with a roller, right?
You sure do. We got a couple options here.
All right, what do you got?
I'm going to use this one right here.
So we got this guy here, this regular paint roller, right?
Yeah, for my latex sealer that I'm going to put down.
You don't want to use that for sealers on a concrete patio.
Explain.
All right, so with this type of a roller, right, the fuzzy roller that you'd use for a latex paint on a house, you're going to have all kinds of problems when you go to seal a patio. First of all those fuzzy little fibers are probably going to get pulled off by the rough texture of the pavers, right? Edges of pavers can be very sharp. Sealers can be a little bit sticky. Okay. You're going to start losing little fuzzies that get embedded in the top of your sealer project. So
might be a nice accent feature to the overall finish, Mike. They might like it.
These rollers, you know, they may also be kind of non-solvent resistant grades, so you could have them melt if you're using a solvent-based sealer. And they also don't tend to do a very good job of conforming to the surface and leaving a uniform film. What we want to use is what we refer to as a slit foam roller. So the slit foam rollers, well, you've got the yellow version and a gray version, but it's essentially a 3/4 inch nap foam roller that has all these slices in it. So this is going to do a much better job of giving an even, uniform coat, conforming to the surface, and not leaving little fuzzy strings all over the place.
Okay, so we have the yellow one that's going to be for water-based?
That's correct.
All right, can I use solvent-based with that one?
You can't. If you use solvent-based with this yellow roller, very quickly this foam is going to start to expand, separate from the core, and disintegrate. So you don't want to use a yellow roller with any solvent-based sealers. The gray roller is the way to go there. Gray roller, solvent-resistant core, solvent-resistant foam, going to do a much better job for those solvent-based jobs.
right.
Oh, you're ahead of me, huh?
No, I'm jumping in to the real deal. Start the show.
I'm not a big fan of doing any sizable sealer project with a roller. When you put that roller in the paint tray, it's coated with sealer, right?
Yep.
You start rolling out on your project, and you get a nice heavy coat.
Yeah.
What
You get a heavy
happens-
coat, you might get some puddling, some pooling, you might have to push it around, use a little bit of elbow grease. You tend to use way more sealer than you need to with a roller.
But inevitably, it starts out heavy, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter, right? Then you
Right.
put it back in the paint tray, it's heavy, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. The way sealers work is a little bit different than paint. So we need to get a nice, even, uniform coat in order to have a nice, uniform, even appearance, right? Paint looks pretty much the same as long as it's covering whatever is underneath, right? Doesn't really matter if it's a little bit thicker in one area. You don't typically see that. But sealers act a little bit differently. We've got to get as uniform a coat as we can, and that's really hard to do just with a roller.
No, so we're going to bring in a sprayer.
We are going to bring in a sprayer. So a sprayer like this is what you need to spray solvent-based sealers, right? Solvent-based sealers will melt a plastic sprayer, Chris. That's a
will.
mess on a job site. Typically, the hose melts first, ends up shooting sealer all over the place, and ruins your project and your day.
Yeah, I've seen the pressure build up in those things and explode because the fittings have been melted within.
All right, so hey, you can use that plastic sprayer for a water-based job. You know, don't use the $10 sprayer to try to apply sealer. You're not going to get a great spray pattern out of it. Invest in a decent sprayer, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're going to do solvent-based or water-based, you know, get something that's pretty high quality. These sprayers work very well. Nice, even, uniform fan pattern. Any sprayer that you buy, go out and try it, right? Test it out.
Put some water into it. You know, don't waste any sealer that you might purchase. Put some water into it, see what the flow is like, see how many overlaps you got to do. This sprayer itself is pretty awesome. This is a Chapin Extreme. We all have them. This is an Alliance branded one. I don't think we make these anymore, but fantastic option for you to seal.
All right, one thing that I do recommend is straining your sealer when you put it into the sprayer. So we've got these cones here, and these cones just take out any little strands of hardened up sealer, any goopy gloppy parts. That's going to make sure that your tip doesn't get clogged. If you don't strain your sealer, hey, 9 times out of 10, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But the one time that you have some issues with little crusty chunks, it's going to continually clog that spray nozzle and drive you absolutely nuts. Every 30 seconds, that nozzle is going to be clogged. You're going to take it off, unclog it, put it back on. It'll clog immediately. It's not a fun situation. So little strainer goes a long way.
Does the strainer go for solvent as well as water-based?
It does.
Okay.
You know, I'd say that you're more likely to have an issue with water-based sealers, but I strain solvent and water-based sealers.
Now, do you do any kind of mixing with the containers of sealer before you put them in?
It doesn't hurt. You're probably going to need a little bit more agitation on your water-based sealers. You know, your solvent-based sealers are pretty well mixed and dissolved, and they're going to stay that way.
Okay.
All right. So, rollers. All right. You get the right rollers. You know, that's how you're going to apply your sealer, but it's hard to do an even job. Sprayer definitely helps, but you can't just spray alone, right?
No, so especially with the water-based sealers, and when we're spraying that application, we're still going to need to do a back roll. We're not really trying to push the material around and get an even coat. The sprayer is going to do that for us, but a lot of these textured pavers have low points, and the sealer will migrate to those low points. And if you do get a buildup that dries like that, it's going to be maybe shinier than the rest of the project or have a visual difference than the rest of the project. So we will always follow the sprayer with a back roll with that either foam roller or the yellow one or the black one.
Right, so it's important to kind of set up your sealing job as a two-person job. You're going to have one person on a roller, you know, with a pole, so they don't have to bend over all day, and one person on that sprayer. So as you spray, you need to roll. So we're going to show you a little video of applying a solvent-based sealer here with a sprayer, and then we're going to kind of move over to our demo pit while you're watching and get ready to apply a water-based sealer for you live, kind of going through that spraying and back rolling process to kind of show you how it's done here. All right, so you can see that they are applying the sealer there, or at least they're going to as soon as that video unfreezes. So we've got the sealer being applied, and they're doing a pretty good job of giving it a nice, even, uniform coat. That person on the roller there should be using a gray roller for solvent-based sealer. And they're eliminating any puddling or ponding that is occurring there. So eliminating that puddling or ponding is going to make that surface look more uniform. If we left sealer that was built up in the low areas of that paver, you'd get little extra shiny spots where that sealer was thicker than the other areas. So two-person job, we're spraying that sealer on and having someone roll it right away. What happens if you sprayed it on and came back 5-10 minutes later to roll it?
It's going to be dry by that point. Or start to get tacky, at least.
It's going to be drying. You could have a lot of problems. One of the common issues with a solvent-based sealer and rolling it too late is this spider webbing effect. You'll almost see like cotton candy strands getting pulled off of the paver.
Now, and I'll see that on hotter days too, where you spray, the pavers are a little bit too hot, then you really like them, and you spray down. The second that you put the roller down on the ground, you start to see those spider webs.
So that's a sign that you shouldn't be out there working, right?
No.
Shouldn't be out there installing sealer if it is that hot and that sealer is getting to the point where it's so tacky, you're going to be pulling those strings off right away. Now,
Sure.
if you get really good at it and you get to the point where you can spray that solvent evenly and uniformly, well, maybe you get away at working with higher temperatures, right?
Sure. Now, before you start the sealing process itself, you might have to do a little bit of prep. And what I mean by that is if you have like a walkway that extends into maybe an asphalt driveway, we don't want to seal the asphalt.
Same thing with an outdoor kitchen that's surrounded by pavers, right? We want to make sure that we're going to protect certain things that should not get sprayed. So you could, tape them off, right?
Yeah, tape.
Use some plastic and tape.
Painter's plastic, like a very low mil. You don't need anything really heavy, or even blankets.
You could use cardboard or a plastic spray shield and kind of move that along as you apply your sealer to protect those areas from overspray. So there are some different options, but you need to plan that ahead of time and figure out, hey, how am I going to avoid spraying the house, spraying the outdoor kitchen, spraying the driveway? Because if you spray sealer on those things, you're not going to get it off very easily.
Oh, you're sealing them.
Another option is to potentially cut in the edges, right? Maybe use the roller to cut in the edges, just like you would a wall on a house, right?
Yeah.
You could use that spray shield. If you do cut in the edges with a roller, you need to make sure that you're trying to cut in to an established line. So is there a border? Maybe you can just cut in that border and roll that and then spray the field. It's tough if you roll right through the middle of a paver to then get the field very even and consistent from your next application. Okay. Oftentimes, when you apply a sealer and you've cut in the border, it looks pretty uneven as you're doing it, but over time, over the next 12, 24 hours, it does tend to even out quite a bit.
Okay.
All right, so we got some pavers down here, Chris.
We got some pavers.
They're properly efflorescence cleaned?
I think so.
They are.
Yes, they are.
We do have a few imperfections, right? There's a few scuffs that you might see on here. Hey, those scuffs may be highlighted a little bit from our sealer application.
Yeah.
We might want to address that with the homeowner beforehand and just let them know, hey, there's a few scratches on here. It's possible that they may be a little bit more apparent once we put this sealer on.
Yeah, but you definitely want to set the expectation, especially if you did a spot treatment and maybe you didn't get 100% of the grease out. Definitely want to bring them over, show them so they don't bring it up after the fact. There's really nothing we can do after it's sealed.
All right, so we're going to apply a water-based film-forming sealer with a sprayer, and then Chris is going to roll out any puddling or ponding that does occur. So I'm going to get my sprayer here, and again, you can use a metal sprayer like this for water-based or solvent-based. You could just use a plastic sprayer for our water-based products. All right, so Chris is mixing that up a little bit. Now, what I'm doing here is exactly what you don't want to do. Don't stage your sprayer and the area that you're going to pour your sealer into the sprayer on top of your pavers, right? You're inevitably going to drip here and there. Those drip marks are going to be visible imperfections in your finished surface. So you need to figure out an area off of the project where you can stage your equipment and work. So that might include putting a tarp or a blanket down or some cardboard.
Yep, I've definitely seen a bunch of people maybe go to like a mulched area. You don't want to do that either because the mulch might attach itself to the bottom of your sprayer, and you're going to be going over the entire project with your sprayer anyways, and bits and pieces of the mulch might drop down. So, you know, a painter's blanket, some sort of tarp, just make sure you're prepared with something like that.
Right, and you don't even just want to go into the street, right? You start
No.
spilling sealer in the street, that's going to be a visible imperfection that's difficult to remove.
Yep.
So we've got our strainer cone, right? We're going to strain our sealer out as we pour it into our sprayer here. So the sealer, water-based sealers typically tend to look kind of whitish in appearance. Solvent-based sealers are clear. So you saw that solvent-based sealer being sprayed in the previous video. That was generally a clear material. This water-based sealer is a milky white, almost bluish white in appearance, but it is going to dry clear.
Yep. And Mike, where are you getting these strainers?
These strainers are available at any paint store, big box store, Amazon. They are very cheap. They typically last a while with water-based sealers. They do kind of fall apart after a few gallons of solvent-based sealers, so make sure you order a few of them.
Now, I think we should leave this container here. Maybe you kind of get a few pumps in and maybe spray that into the pail itself.
Right, so again, I certainly would advise you to fill your sprayer with water when you first get it.
Yeah.
Go out and just test that spray pattern, right? Get used to how that sealer is going to come out of your sprayer, the uniformity of it, and make sure that you can do a nice job without overlapping or ending up with any kind of drips or problems in there.
Yeah, but we definitely want to make sure that it works and it's spraying accurately. So we're going to give this a few pumps, and then we're going to load some of that sprayer from the tip back into this container before we go to the project. The last thing we want is to be on the project and the spray is not coming out even at all.
So your tips can have different flow ratings on them. They might be a 0.5 gallon per minute, a 1 gallon per minute, a 1.5 gallon per minute. I typically like the lower flow rates on here. Having a gallon of sealer come out every minute is an awful lot of sealer,
Quite a
right?
bit, yeah.
We want to use those lower flow rates, gives us a little bit more control, better distribution of that sealer without getting it on too thick in any one area. Another key is keeping sufficient pressure in the pump sprayer, right, Chris? What
Yeah.
happens if you get low pressure?
Well, the flow is going to be very weak and it's not going to be as even.
Right,
How
you're-
many times do you think, or how often do you think we should repump?
You need to repump pretty frequently. That's also something that you kind of need to practice. You can get pretty good to the point where you're able to continue spraying, put that pump sprayer down and keep pumping and keep moving along.
Yeah.
If you really have to stop, you probably want to move off of the project so that you avoid any drips from the nozzle.
Okay. Well, you're pumping quite a bit here, Mike.
Well, we only put a gallon in there, so you got to fill up all that airspace and pressurize it. If you put 3 gallons in here, we wouldn't have to pump quite as much.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got our sprayer ready to go. Now, as Chris mentioned, I'm going to kind of use this container to get my sprayer ready to go. I'm going to spray a little bit of material in there.
Looks good.
Yep, coming out nicely. I'm ready to go. So when you go to work your project, obviously you don't want to work yourself into a corner and get yourself trapped.
No,
You want to avoid walking over that sealer as much as possible. So we are going to work our way out from a house, from a corner.
Yeah.
Protect any areas that we need to with masking tape, with painter's plastic, with cardboard, with blankets. Prevent any overspray on plants. And it's a very simple process. I'm kind of coming along in here, and I am spraying my sealer.
And now, how big of a section are you going to work in?
I would say that you want to work in manageable areas, and that's going to partly depend on temperature. So the hotter it is, the smaller the areas that you have to work in. So Chris is going to roll that out, making sure that we kind of have an even coating on the pavers, and we don't have too much built up in any one area. Now, those little bubbles that you see are not a problem. They're going to dissipate. What would be a problem would be leaving sealer on this thick in one area.
Now, Mike, should I be pressing down on this roller as I'm moving?
You don't want to be too aggressive with that. So you want to be kind of rolling this out very quickly behind the person spraying, and you don't want to be very aggressive. So you're not putting a lot of pressure into this, and you are not going back and forth too much.
So I'm just letting the weight of the roller kind of do its job.
That's kind of the idea. Gentle elimination of any puddling and ponding that's occurring on the surface.
I'm a pro, Mike.
You are a pro. Nice work, Chris. So really not much to it. As we talked about, most Alliance sealers typically cover about 175 to 200 square feet per gallon. They're a one-coat product, so we're not doing multiple coats. We're simply doing one even uniform coat, targeting that kind of 175 to 200 square feet per gallon. Now, with this product, this is that water-based acrylic film forming sealer. So it's going to leave a slight plastic layer on the surface, giving us color enhancement and gloss. Again, it takes 24 hours to cure, right? So we get some rain on this in an hour, we got a problem.
We got a big problem within the next 24 hours.
So we've got to let this dry, let that film fully cure before it sees any rainfall. Got to make sure that the temperatures were correct for our application. If it was too hot, that sealer's basically getting cooked, and cooking that sealer can have some negative effects, turning white and hazy, not bonding to the surface properly. So we want to make sure we're working at the appropriate temperatures. Okay. So if we had a problem, if this all turned white because it rained in an hour, what are we going to do, Chris?
Well, when it comes to a water-based sealer, unfortunately, the only thing you can do is strip it off and start from scratch.
Yeah, that's really a bummer.
Yeah.
So water-based sealers, there's no easy way to repair them. You simply have to remove them and start over again. So removal typically consists of using a hot pressure washer to blast that sealer off, or chemically stripping it.
Yeah.
Both are tedious, time-consuming, messy projects.
Well, they're messy in regards to there's some other collateral damage. You could have polysand that you're going to be affecting. So not only are you removing a sealer, you're removing the polysand. You might as well continue to remove the polysand just so you can bring more polysand back. And then you have to do a re-cleaning, and then you do the sealing again. It sounds like a lot of expense.
Sure does.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of solvent-based sealers is that they're much easier to fix. So with those solvent-based sealers, if they happen to turn cloudy, get a little bit white or not bond to the surface properly, we can simply apply xylene or acetone, similar to how we just applied the sealer, and that xylene or acetone is going to re-emulsify the original coating, turn it back into a liquid, and almost allow us to restart the entire project.
Okay, Mike, so if you're saying that we just applied a solvent-based sealer, 30 minutes goes by, it's still a little tacky, we have a downpour, and it all turns white, I come back the next day. You're telling me I can grab some xylene, put it in that sprayer, spray it on, and it fixes it right away?
Well, it depends on how thick the coating is and what the problem is. So sometimes just spraying on some xylene is enough to do the job.
Okay.
Sometimes you've got to spray that xylene on and kind of agitate the surface with a roller a little bit to get that sealer coating to break down, allow that moisture to escape, and allow the sealer to rebond to the surface. Sometimes it takes a few applications of xylene and a little bit of scrubbing. On occasion, I've had to use a deck brush, kind of scrub things around. Excessive sealer applications, if they put it on too thick, can be remedied with xylene, but you've got to soften up that sealer and wipe off some of the excess. So there's ways to fix most solvent-based problems. Unfortunately, there really isn't a way to fix a water-based issue.
Unfortunately.
So hey, Chris's favorite product is satin look for a reason.
Absolutely.
All right, any questions out there, Jordan?
So a big one I'm seeing is PPE for installing sealer / like best practices to get rid of excess sealer in the jug of the sprayer.
Okay, so I would say that you really don't need much personal protective equipment for a water-based sealer.
No.
If you're working with the solvent-based sealers, they do have volatile organic compounds, right? You smell the fumes from the solvent. You may want to wear a respirator, to minimize your exposure to those VOCs, especially if it is a kind of closed-in area. And as far as getting rid of the excess sealers, the water-based sealers are very easy to dispose of. They're non-toxic. They're water-based. The solvent-based sealers, you'd have to put them back in the can or container that they came in. Take them to your local hazmat disposal facility where they would take paint and car chemicals, antifreeze,
like
that kind of stuff.
Sherwin-Williams, they'll take them back. So you just gotta go there, check.
Now, how about cleaning out your sprayer, Chris?
So Mike mentioned xylene a few minutes ago. Xylene is a way that I'm going to keep maintaining my sprayer.
If you use solvent-based sealers.
If I use solvent-based sealers. So there's an acrylic there, so they could potentially start clogging up those sprayers. So at the end of the job, I'm going to go ahead and put roughly a half a gallon of xylene into that sprayer, tip it over, kind of move it around a little bit, and then I'm going to spray it back into the xylene container. And now I have a well-maintained sprayer.
Right, we need to keep our sprayer clean. Those sealers can kind of gunk up different parts if they're not thoroughly rinsed and flushed out of the sprayer. Your tips start to get clogged up. You're going to get uneven spray patterns where you're not getting a uniform distribution. So it is important to clean and maintain your sprayers. You wash them out with water if it was a water-based sealer, clean them with xylene or acetone if it was a solvent-based sealer, and then make sure you leave your sprayer open so that it can dry, right? Leave the top off of it, leave the valve open on the nozzle, just to make sure that that solvent or water can evaporate inside. What else, Jordan?
That is really the basis of all the questions. Maybe lifespan of water-based and solvent-based?
All right, that's an excellent question as
good
well.
question,
So water-based sealers typically last 18 to 24 months. Solvent-based sealers have effectively double that lifespan. So you're talking about 36 to 48 months. Yeah. So solvent-based sealers have typically better color enhancement, better gloss, better lifespan, more repairability. There's been a big push in the industry lately towards water-based products being the future, being green-friendly. But we really think that most of the advantages still lie with those solvent-based products for a professional applicator. Yep. All right. So you want to summarize things for us, Chris?
Yeah, let's take a debrief what we talked about here. So, first thing, what is the desired result of the homeowner? What actively are they looking for? Are they looking for an aesthetic difference? Are they looking for just a protection? And that'll determine roughly which sealer to use. If we're going for a high gloss because they want it to look shiny, we're going to go with a high gloss. Maybe they want an enhancement. They want it to darken slightly. And then, we talked about the resources. We talked about our blog. We talked about us representatives just being a resource for you. We are willing to get out there and help you and your guys learn how to get this done. Our blog will now offer an ebook, which is 40 plus pages on how to effectively start and be successful in a cleaning and sealing business. We talked about preparation and how vital that is. It is the most important step in everything that we're trying to do here. Take your time with the preparation, do all your spot cleanings, make sure you open up your pores with your Efflorescence cleaner. You have some longevity in your sealing project and hopefully repeat business a couple years down the line. And then sealing, I know there's a lot of information out there, but ultimately it is very easy. And talk to our representatives, and we'll try to break it down as easy as possible, limit you to a few different products and an application that you can do over and over again and be very profitable.
Yep. I think that the real key is that prep work, right? If you prepare the project properly and then you work in the right weather conditions, Chris is right. The sealing part's easy. Yeah. I could go out and I could seal a 5,000 square foot driveway in probably 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, not much labor
involved. The prep work would take me a lot longer, right? Yeah. Getting it to that point, getting it ready to seal, making sure I was going out under the right conditions, that's really the challenging part. So don't really, don't push the envelope, don't try to take shortcuts, and your sealer jobs will turn out the way they should.
Very good. Mike, before we break here, I think we got one more poll question. Time of the year, we really want to know who's going to win the Super Bowl. Let's see what we got here. We got the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
Let's see what the audience says. Chris, you're putting a big bet on whatever the audience says?
I am. I'm going with the audience here, so please don't fail me.
All right. Looks like the Eagles are going to win.
Okay. Sorry, Taylor Swift.
Hey. All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us. Hopefully you learned a few things. If you have any questions, reach out to your local Alliance rep. Cleaners and sealers can seem scary, but it really is quite simple when you look at the basics, what's involved in it. We can go out there and help, as Chris mentioned. We're happy to go out on your first sealing job and make sure that everything's going to go according to plan and that you can go through and kind of repeat that success over and over again.
Yep. Well, thank you for coming. We'll see you next time.